I've done quite a lot of videos about non-duality, and I have a playlist also where I answer people's questions about non-duality. And when taking a look at the comments for these many videos, there's a pattern that emerges, that is repeated over and over again. Now there are many positive comments, but there are also a certain amount of comments where people say, you don't understand non-duality, or you clearly don't understand non-duality, or you absolutely don't understand non-duality, or you obviously don't understand non-duality. Now many of these comments, they don't say anything beyond that. They don't say why I don't understand non-duality. But it doesn't really matter, because what I wanted to comment on here is this idea: do I understand non-duality? And I freely, openly admit, no, I don't. I do not understand non-duality. So why do I say that? Well, we all know apples. If I take a bite of this apple, what happens? I'm tasting the taste of an apple. I'm tasting the apple. But what is it that's happening to me when I'm chewing an apple? Well, I have an experience of the taste of an apple. Do I understand what an experience tastes like? Do I understand what an apple tastes like? No, I don't understand it. If you asked me to give an intellectual description, a rational, scientific explanation of what an apple tastes like, I couldn't do it. Why would I bother doing it? I know what an apple tastes like. I've experienced that since I was 3 years old, or however, maybe even earlier. So why do I need to understand something that I have a direct experience of? And it's the same with non-duality. If you are saying, you, Kim, don't understand non-duality, what you are implicitly saying is, number one, you think that you understand non-duality, and I don't. But number two, which is the more subtle, is you think non-duality is something that can be understood. And you think you have acquired an understanding of what non-duality is. Now, I have an old friend who used to work for the National Science Foundation in the United States, and she was part of the work they did on the South Pole. And she spent quite a bit of time on the South Pole, so she has described to me what it's like on the South Pole, including that the snow blows so bad that it covers every building within a matter of a few years, and they have to take some extreme measures to prevent all of their buildings from being covered in snow. And based on her description, I have an understanding of what it's like on the South Pole. But I don't have an experience of what it's like because I haven't been there. And so, why do you need an understanding of something? Well, you don't have a direct experience. If you have a direct experience, you don't need to understand it. It may seem subtle, but just step back a little bit. You probably never tried to describe the taste of the apple to another person. And why not? Because you never met a person who didn't taste an apple. So we don't need an experience, a description. We don't need an understanding of what an apple tastes like. But if we haven't experienced non-dual awareness, we need an understanding, or at least a description of the experience. And maybe there's an important difference to consider. Description versus understanding. You see, if you just have a description of something, like what it's like on the South Pole, that's neutral. It's just a description. But when you have an understanding, for many people, the idea of understanding something is that now your mind feels it has taken ownership of it. Your mind owns the concept that it's understanding. So the moment you decide, your mind decides, I understand non-duality, your mind takes ownership of non-duality. Why is that a problem? Because non-duality is the ultimate challenge for the mind. It is the ultimate challenge to the idea that the mind can take ownership of something, anything. Non-duality in its essence, the non-dual experience, the non-dual awareness, challenges any understanding, any concept, any idea we can formulate in our minds. And it challenges it by saying, no matter what you think you know or understand about non-duality, there's always more. There's always more to grasp, more to experience. In other words, whatever understanding you think you have right now, it is not the final, absolute, ultimate understanding of non-duality. It cannot be. This will make sense to you only if you have experienced non-dual awareness. Because then you will realize that it is quite difficult to describe the taste of an apple. But even if somebody hasn't tasted an apple but has tasted other fruits, you have something you can compare it to. But non-duality, there is nothing in the common experience that you can compare it to. It's completely beyond the common experience. And that is the entire point of non-duality. That is the entire purpose of talking about non-duality, is to describe that there is something beyond the common experience. And so what you can do is you can seek to gain an understanding of the common experience and why the common experience is the way it is. And I've actually described this in several of my videos about non-duality, but I'll give a brief summary here. Now, there are certain non-dual teachers that say that non-dual awareness is our natural state. And I agree with that, with some modifications, because it depends on what you mean with non-dual awareness. But I'll put that aside for now. Let's just say non-dual awareness is our natural state of mind. So, why are we not in that state of mind right now? Why are most people on earth not in that state of mind? Because something has taken us out of our natural state of mind. So now, if you realize that something has taken out of your natural state of mind, wouldn't it stand to reason that you should try to understand what that something is and how it took you out of your natural state of mind? Because in order to get back to the natural state of mind, which is what, and as far as I can tell, most non-dual teachers are talking about, it would seem that you would have to remove what took you away from it. But what you find among most of the non-dual teachers that I have come across is they don't talk about that at all. They talk about non-duality and non-dual state of mind. And they create this goal that it's a certain state of mind where you see the underlying oneness of all life, where there is no suffering, where you've overcome the sense of self, the sense of separation, and it's this, whether they see it as happiness or bliss or enlightenment or awakening, but it's clearly a desirable state of mind that's better than what we have right now. So they are focused on the goal. Why is that a problem? Well, as I've said before, if you're inside a prison cell and you're tied with 147 chains, it doesn't do you a lot of good to fantasize what is outside the prison cell. You have to start by looking at one chain. There's a lock. Then there's a bunch of keys over there in the corner of the cell. Maybe if I found the right key, I could unlock that one lock. Okay, that worked. Now the next chain also has a lock. Now I'm trying to find a key for that one. And as I keep unlocking, I become more and more free. And one day, I'm standing there in front of the closed prison door. And lo and behold, there's one big key that I haven't tried yet. And that fits in the lock of the door. And now I can walk out the cell. But if I had just been sitting there dreaming about how wonderful it will be outside the cell, would I ever have gotten there? But there's an even deeper problem with focusing on non-duality and ignoring duality. And that is, right now, most people on earth are in this state of mind that I call duality and separation. And essentially, as far as I can tell, many of these non-dual teachers, they talk about the same thing, but they just talk about it very briefly. And so, what is this state of mind? It's a state of mind where everything is based on concepts. Everything is based on ideas. Everything is based on understanding that is, mind you, defined by the mind itself. And therefore, whatever definition the mind has come up with, it claims ownership of it. Now, I have several videos in my non-duality playlist where I talk about the duality consciousness. So all I'll say here is very briefly, in duality, there are always two opposite polarities. But these opposite polarities are not the way many non-dual teachers describe it. Here is how many people describe duality. This is duality. There's a circle and a square. They are different. Therefore, there's a duality. What is non-duality? It's the white page where there's no differentiation. And what I'm saying is, no, that is not duality. That's differentiation. The sun is not a dualistic occurrence. It's differentiated from a planet that doesn't shine light from within itself. A circle is not in a duality with a square. They are just differentiated. Now, as I've said before, back in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church thought that the circle is the perfect geometric shape, and therefore all of the heavenly bodies had to move around the earth in perfect circular orbits. And that shows you what duality is, because now you are adding a value judgment on top of the differentiation. So you have the differentiation between circle and square, or for that matter, as the Catholic Church said it, an oval. An oval was considered an imperfect geometric shape, and the circle was the perfect geometric shape. That's a man-made value judgment. Circles and ovals are just geometric shapes. There's no duality there. So we can observe the entire world around us in a non-dual way. by just observing what's happening, what's going on. You're just observing. One person did this, one person said this. We're not evaluating whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, whether they should have done this or shouldn't have done this. You're just observing. That's non-dual awareness. That's non-dual observation. Duality, dual awareness, is when you say, oh, that person is wrong. That person is a bad person. That person shouldn't have done this. Our understanding of non-duality is the only right one, and those other people, they have the wrong one. This value judgment, that's duality. And this is how it ties into ownership, because we human beings, in the state of duality, in the state of separation, we are defining and understanding a concept of what the world should be like, what we want the world to be like. And then once we have defined it, we elevate it to the status of being somehow absolute, the highest possible. Meaning we take ownership of it. So you can go back thousands of years and see God, the concept of God. How different religions have defined God in different ways. And they've each been convinced that they had the absolutely only true definition of God. They took ownership of God. In reality, they only took ownership of their understanding, their concept of God. But they thought and they acted as if they had taken ownership of God. That's the essence of duality. So therefore, what is non-dual awareness? It's a direct experience that there's a different way to look at life than duality. Even though the vast majority of people on earth are looking at life through this duality consciousness, through this illusion that they are separate beings, there is an alternative to this way of looking at life. And that's non-dual awareness. But you see, this is an enormous challenge to implement this. You can have an awareness that there is an alternative to duality. You may even have had some mystical experiences, as I call them, or non-dual experiences. You may even have experienced that there's something outside your normal state of mind. But what happens to most people, myself included, is that in the beginning, when we have these experiences, they are so different from our normal state of mind that we don't really know what to do with them. And therefore, what we do is we try to explain them within the context of our normal worldview. So what is it that happens? Well, the duality consciousness I've talked about, it's like a perception filter around our minds. It's like wearing colored glasses. Colors everything. Suddenly you have an experience that you're stepping outside your normal perception filter, your normal mental box, the duality consciousness. And you're just experiencing without duality. The purpose of having these experiences is that now we can come back into our normal state awareness and we have a frame of reference. There's actually something different from outside of our normal state of awareness, which means we can now begin to question, is our normal way of looking at things, is it real? Is it the way things are? Have I really taken ownership of the world through my understanding? Or is my understanding really actually based on an illusion because it's based on this view that everything is separate, that I'm a separate being? And what happens to some people, and you can clearly see this if you look at some of these non-dual teachers and how they are talking about this, what happens to some people is that they have a genuine experience that there's something outside their normal state of mind, but when they come back from the experience, they now take the experience and explain it within their normal worldview namely separation and duality. So all of a sudden they build an understanding of non-duality that is actually dualistic. It's based on separation. But they now convince themselves that they have the absolute understanding of non-duality. They take ownership of non-duality. In reality, they are only taking ownership of their understanding of duality, which is based on their understanding of non-duality, which is based on duality and separation. They have, in other words, they have created a mental image of what non-duality is. And now they think this is all they need to know about non-duality. But in reality, the whole idea of having these experiences is you question something in your normal worldview. You question something in duality. Then you have another experience. You come back from that, you can question some more. And you keep questioning. So in other words, if you think you understand non-duality, if you think you own non-duality, you have completely misunderstood what is the purpose of the non-dual awareness, the non-dual experience. Because it is only to give you a frame of reference for questioning your normal worldview, your perception filter. And if you don't get that, you haven't even started fathoming what non-duality is about. Because when it comes to questioning your normal worldview, you could say there is an end point. There is a point where you have questioned all of the dualistic elements of your worldview. And when you do that, you can actually attain a state of mind where you are constantly in a what you can call non-dual awareness. Because instead of looking at life, looking at the world, looking at everything that happens to you through these colored glasses of the dualistic worldview, the separate worldview, you're now just observing neutrally. You don't have the dualistic value judgment. Oh, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. You don't have that. It's fallen away. So you can attain that. That is a state of what we could call constant non-dual awareness. You can also call it whatever, awakening, enlightenment, whatever. But take note, this does not come from one experience. I don't care how dramatic of an experience you might have had. It doesn't mean you're instantly awakened or enlightened or in non-dual awareness. I'm not saying that it couldn't be people who have attained a fairly high level of non-dual awareness in a previous lifetime, and in this lifetime they have a dramatic experience, they suddenly awaken, tie into their momentum from past lives. I'm not saying that can't happen. But what I'm saying is, for most people, the first non-dual experience you have does not mean that you are in a permanent non-dual awareness. There's a lot of work to do to question all of these dualistic illusions, what I call the subconscious selves, in many of my videos. And this is where you can see some non-dual teachers that they're sort of selling this dream that many people have in the modern age of this instant results, instant gratification. That we can just awaken and then all our problems are over. And if you look more closely at the videos out there, you'll see that there are now many people that are questioning that approach. There are even some non-dual teachers who used to promote this approach who are now questioning it and realizing that it just doesn't happen that way, because there will be unresolved psychology, there will be illusions that are left even if you have a very dramatic non-dual experience. And you have to work through it before you're free of it. But anyway, I'm still saying you can come to a point where you are not looking at the world through this dualistic filter where you're always evaluating, is it right or wrong, good or bad, should it happen, should it not happen. You can come to that. But even that isn't an ultimate state of consciousness. And why not? Well, because when you are in the dualistic state of consciousness, what is it that happens? You see yourself as a separate being. So, the square is different from the circle. It's fundamentally different from the circle. This is what you in philosophy calls dualism, where, for example, René Descartes, French philosopher in the 1700s, he talked about there are two elements of creation, mind and matter, and they don't mix. This is part of what duality does. You are a separate being, you are separated from other human beings, you are separated from whatever you see as your source, God, the spiritual realm, whatever. You are separate. That means what? You are not connected to anything outside your own mind. Your mind has become a closed system where you think you can define what the world is like. You may not define it personally, you may take some religion, ideology, spiritual teaching, non-dual teaching, whatever it may be. But you take a bunch of ideas and you tie them together to a worldview, and now you think you have defined what the world is like. Now, I started out by saying that non-dual awareness is your natural state of mind. So what is non-dual awareness? Well, it is that you are experiencing that you are connected to something outside your mind. Your mind is not a complete system. Your mind can't define how the world works. Very important difference. Subtle to understand until you've experienced non-dual awareness. But it's an extremely important difference because most people are just in the state of separation and duality, and they think their minds can define how the world works. As I said, you create a concept, an understanding of the world, and now, based on your understanding, you claim ownership of the world. You think this is how the world actually works. I defined it. The Catholic Church has defined it. Ramana Maharshi has defined it. This teacher, that teacher has defined how the world actually works. Once you overcome that illusion, once you experience that there is a reality outside your own mind. Now, at this point, I'm not even going to talk about what that reality is. I'm just saying you can have the experience that you're inside your mind and looking at everything through the perception filter of your mind. And then you can step outside of that perception filter and you can experience something that is clearly outside your own mind. Your mind didn't produce this. Everything else that's going on in your mind has essentially produced. This is what most people would deny, but many spiritual people are beginning, you really become spiritual when you start questioning, is everything that's created in my mind, is everything there real? Or is there something more to understand than what is created in my own mind? So once you begin to experience that there is a reality outside your own mind, you switch the way you look at yourself. Instead of seeing yourself as a separate being, you see yourself as a connected being. And in the beginning, you just have an intuitive sense, an intuitive experience of being connected to something greater than your own mind. You probably don't in the beginning, at least most people I met didn't in the beginning, have a clear idea or vision of what you're connected to. But what happens to most of us is that we all have a desire to understand life. That's why we are essentially creating this worldview where we think we have defined how life works, because we have a need to understand the situation we're in. Once we start having these non-dual experiences, we have a need to explain that too, to understand it. So what we usually do is we find a spiritual teaching, and then this teaching gives an explanation for the experience we're having. And it may, for example, say you are connected to your higher self, your spiritual self. Or you are connected to what? Infinite awareness, non-dual awareness, Brahman, Atman, whatever names and concepts they put on it. So they explain that you are connected to something outside your own mind. And it's not that there's anything problematic with that necessarily, but it can become a problem if you are still allowing the separate mind, the dualistic mind, to use the spiritual teaching to now create an understanding of your non-dual experience. And now you feel you have ownership of the non-dual experience. You feel you understand the experience. In other words, instead of seeking a greater and greater connection through having more and more of these experiences that are outside your own mind, you are now pulling the experience into your own mind, into your worldview, and explaining it there, and now you feel you have ownership of it. But as I was saying before, if you really grasp what non-dual awareness or a path to non-dual awareness is all about, it's about never shutting off the connection once you have experienced it, but keep continuing to build on it, to have more and more of these experiences of stepping outside your own mind, more and more clear experiences. And what is happening, it's like there's two things that are happening at the same time. When we are completely trapped in duality, our awareness is completely pulled out. We're looking at the world all the time. We are projecting that the problem is out there. It's other people that need to change, not us, in the lower levels of duality. As we begin to rise to a higher awareness of the spiritual side of life and have these experiences, what happens is we gradually start pulling our awareness away from the outer things. They are not as important anymore. They don't own us. You see, what happens is when in your mind you create this understanding and you think you own the phenomenon, you understand, well, the phenomenon, or rather your understanding of it, actually owns you because it owns your attention. So as you walk the spiritual path, you are gradually pulling your attention away from the world. And then the ideal outcome is that you are now directing your attention outside your mind to see, what am I connected to? And you increase gradually your awareness of what you are connected to. And you get a deeper, more detailed grasp, experience of what you are connected to. The problem is that some non-dual teachings do not really have the concept that you are connected to something, because they have gone into this blind alley that I talk about, for example, in my video about the nonsense of non-self and several other videos, where they're saying there is nothing to be connected to, because any sense of self is an illusion. There is only separation and non-dual reality, whether you call it infinite awareness or Brahman or Atman or whatever you call it. This is what I've explained in several videos that is the problem. They will say this is a duality because there's differentiation. As soon as there's differentiation between self and other, there's a duality. But that's not the original meaning of non-duality, because originally the word Advaita means not two. And again, this is subtle to a grasp. The circle and the square, aren't they two? Aren't they different? Where did they come from? Could the two have existed if there wasn't a white background? How do you draw anything if there isn't a background? If there was nothing white there, I couldn't draw two figures that are different. So not two means there are not two fundamentally separate aspects of reality, such as mind or matter or whatever it may be, or Brahman or the world. Many times you hear this quote, only Brahman is real, the world is an illusion. But the original quote is, only Brahman is real, the world is an illusion, the world is Brahman. It's not a matter of saying that the circle and the square are duality. It's that they both sprang from the right page. And everything in the world that is differentiated all came from the same source. You can call it Brahman, you can call it God, you can call it the Creator, you can call it non-dual awareness or infinite awareness, whatever you want to call it. But differentiation is not duality. And that means that some of these non-dual teachers who think they understand non-duality, they have reasoned, because they put themselves on a certain track that they can't get out of. They have reasoned that any sense of self is unreal. Any sense of self is an illusion. And therefore the goal is to have no self. Now, I understand that there are people who will immediately say, but I have had this experience you're talking about of non-dual awareness, and there was no sense of self. I understand, I've had the same experience. I just don't interpret it the way you interpret it, to mean that any sense of self is unreal. Why? Well, simple logic. I had an experience. I am aware that I had an experience. I am able to describe the experience or remember the experience, and I'm able to explain the experience in some kind of context. There is always going to be an I. And what's wrong with that? This is the whole, not the whole problem, but it's part of the problem, is that you think that differentiation is unreal, but differentiation came from somewhere. It doesn't appear out of nowhere. If you say there's something called Brahman, that is the ultimate reality, then the world must have come out of Brahman, because there was a point, supposedly, where there was no world, there was only Brahman. But then Brahman differentiated itself as the world. And there was a point where there was no you, only Brahman. So where did you come from? Well, Brahman, or the Creator, differentiated itself as you. But not the you that you see yourself as right now, if you see yourself as a separate being. The Creator differentiated itself as you, seeing yourself as a connected being. Now, you had a very rudimentary point-like sense of self, so you didn't really see what you were connected to. But you saw yourself as connected to something. And what is the purpose of this? Well, this is again what the non-dual teachers get themselves into a blind alley, because they're essentially saying that since everything in the world, since any sense of self is unreal, there is no purpose for our existence. Somehow infinite awareness manifested itself as you, forgot its infinite awareness, and the whole purpose is that infinite awareness awakens from this dream and realizes it is infinite awareness, and you disappear back into infinite awareness as if you never existed. What would be the point of that? Did infinite awareness make a mistake? Could infinite awareness make a mistake? So what I've said in several of my non-duality videos is that we are created for the purpose of expanding our sense of self. And as we expand our sense of self, we are experimenting with our co-creative abilities and with our free will. And as part of this process of the growth in our sense of self, there comes a point where we have to experiment with an aspect of free will, which precisely is duality, the duality consciousness. And when we see ourselves as connected beings, we have an open state of mind, because we realize there's more to know, there's more to understand, there's more to experience than what we have right now. But when you switch and go into this state of separation, you want to think that you have the ultimate understanding of the world so that you own the world. And that's perfectly allowed as a part of our growth process, because we must experiment with what we can do with free will. And so we can see ourselves as connected beings. We are seeking to discover how the world actually works. Or we can go into separation, see ourselves as separate beings. And now we are seeking with our own minds, separate minds, to define how the world should work. This is perfectly allowed. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It has consequences, which is we will always suffer, because we go into the pairs that the Buddha was talking about 2,500 years ago, the dualistic extremes, right and wrong, good and bad. So we are always thinking that there's something wrong with the world. It isn't the way it should be according to my mental image. And therefore, we are constantly trying to change the world so that we can have a sense of peace of mind, or a sense that we have everything under control and we are secure. And this puts us in a constant tension with other people who are in the same state of separation and who are trying to change the world according to their mental images, which are different from ours. So that's why there's constant tension in separation. And this is what most people see as suffering. And this is what many people, they are attracted to non-duality because they want to get out of suffering. But if you take the very consciousness that makes you suffer and use that separate consciousness to create an understanding of what non-duality is not going to free you from suffering. Your understanding of non-duality is not going to free you from suffering. It could actually intensify the suffering, as has happened to some people. So what I'm saying here is very simple. I have been on the spiritual path for almost 49 years now. I have studied all kinds of teachings. I've had all kinds of experiences. I don't think I understand reality fully. I don't think I have a complete understanding. Why? Because I see myself as a connected being. I have a pretty good idea what I'm connected to. I have a very direct experience of what I'm connected to. But I also realize, very simple, I am an embodiment on a planet called Earth, which is a very dense planet. I've talked about in several of my videos, they are natural planets, but Earth is an unnatural planet, which is very dense. The collective consciousness is very dense. Even matter is dense. And as a being an embodiment on this planet, my mind has a limited capacity. I cannot, with my mind, grasp ultimate reality. I can't. I freely admit it, and it was an enormous liberation to admit it. But I also experience directly that I am connected to minds that are beyond my own mind. And they are at a higher level of energy, higher level of vibration than I am. And they have a much broader understanding than I have. And that's why for many years, I haven't allowed myself to think that I have the ultimate understanding of any concept. I have what I can see based on where I'm at right now, in the physical and in consciousness. I'm constantly seeking to raise my consciousness, and as I do, I see more. But I realize fully that as long as I'm on earth, I will not have the ultimate understanding of anything, let alone non-duality, which is probably the hardest concept or reality to understand. And I realized that until I permanently ascend from earth, meaning I exit earth, there is a limit to what I can understand. And once I have exited, there is much more that I'll be able to understand. But that, of course, is based on the realization that there is a part of me that's real. So I've talked about duality, separation. So when we go into separation, we are creating what's commonly called the ego. Now, it's really made up of many of these what I call subconscious selves or separate selves that are based on illusions that we take on in order to see ourselves as separate beings and in order to create this sense that we have the ultimate understanding or worldview. And so this is the separate sense of self. And I agree with many of the non-dual teachers who say this is unreal and it needs to fall away and we need to awaken from the illusions that it's based on. Perfectly correct. But what I experience is that once you awaken from these illusions, you don't disappear, because now you realize that you were never this outer self. There's a part of you that was not the outer self. I call it the conscious you. I've talked about it in several videos. And there's a part of you that's just pure neutral awareness. It is like I said from the very beginning. You can observe the world without making these dualistic judgments, good and bad, right or wrong, should or shouldn't happen. You're just observing neutrally. And that's what the conscious you can do when it is not experiencing itself through these outer selves and their perception filter. So this is who you are, and this self is not going to go away. Well, it is eventually going to go away when you ascend and merge back into oneness with your spiritual self, your higher self, or what I call the I am presence. And that is the process of the ascension. And this is where you become a permanent being. Whereas right now, the conscious you is really an impermanent being because you haven't ascended. And I explained this in several of my videos, and it's complicated, so I'm not going to go into it here. But what I'm saying is, the experience that I have is that there is the core of my being, the core of my identity is real. It's a sense of self, but it's not the separate self. But it is a differentiated individual self. It's not that it's nothing. It's not that it's Brahman. It's not that it's Atman. It's not that it's infinite awareness. It is an individual self that is an extension of the Creator's being. And quite frankly, if you don't experience that, if you don't experience that there is a part of you that is real, then you are still trapped in duality and separation. And you have imposed an understanding upon yourself that there is nothing real in the self, that any self is unreal. But this is an understanding based on separation. It's not an experience. Well, it is an experience in the sense you're experiencing through that perception filter. But it's not a non-dual experience. Non-dual experience, there's always going to be an experiencer. I see these non-dual teachers, they are talking about how, oh, you have this experience and there's no self, there's no differentiation. But who's talking about it then? Who's talking about having this experience? What had the experience? What is now talking about it? And that's what I'm saying. When you strip the outer self away, you can connect to your real self and you experience you are real. There is a part of you that is real. And it's not that the goal of the non-dual path is to disappear into nothingness or no differentiation. It is actually that when you overcome duality, that's when you really start the path of expanding and discovering yourself, who you are, who you want to be, as a co-creator with the creator who created the entire world of form, including us. And that gives a whole different approach to the whole topic of non-duality. Because quite frankly, let me just share an observation I made. Okay? When I watch some of these people that talk about non-self and the goal is to awaken from the dream and the illusion, they seem depressed to me. I don't care how they try to disguise it. I don't care how they try to talk about it and pep it up like this is some wonderful thing. They just seem depressed. And quite frankly, if you think that the goal of your striving on the spiritual path is to go into non-existence, how could you not be depressed? Because the simple fact is, why are you striving in the first place? Why are you seeking something? Why did you get attracted to spirituality or non-duality or what you are attracted to? Why? Because the core of your being is created, designed to strive to be more than it is right now. As I explained in several videos, the goal really is that we raise our sense of self till we reach the same level of awareness as the Creator who created us, which is a long way off. But that's why we have this built-in desire to self-transcend, to be more. And that's why you were attracted to non-duality in the first place, or spiritual teachings. But when you hear a teaching that says, oh no, you have misunderstood that, that's just a separate self that feels this way. The goal is to cease to exist. Then it goes completely against who you are. Your basic drive to self-transcend, it goes against it completely. And there's something in you, if you pay attention, there's something in you that says, this can't be right. This can't be all there is. There's got to be more than this. Just pay attention right now and see if there isn't some sense in you there must be more. And all I'm telling you here is, yes, there is. And you can discover it by following a path of constant self-transcendence where you become more and more connected and more aware of what you are connected to. Take note, I'm not putting any words on what you're connected to here. I'm just saying you're connected to something. And as you overcome separation, you get a clearer and clearer vision of what you're connected to. And that is the real path and the real meaning of non-duality. Because what you are connected to, is a non-dual reality, not the dualistic separate self. But again, non-dual is not the same as non-differentiation. because differentiation is the essential feature of the world we are in, because the being who created this world chose to differentiate itself as the world. And the reason we have all these phenomena that seem to be different is that this is what helps us grow in self-awareness. Because we come to a point where we see beyond the differentiation. And therefore we come to a point where we can fully accept I am an expression of my Creator. I, the self, the real self that I am an extension of my Creator, and I have the potential to attain the same awareness as my Creator if I keep transcending myself until I reach that level. That's the whole purpose of life. And there is something in you that wants to know this and that will feel this knowledge, this awareness is the ultimate liberation. That you can always be more.